What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to this brand new course where I'm going to teach you how you can create this beautiful food delivery application. I'll show you how you can implement this design, which you can add to your portfolio as well. So, without further wasting any time, let's dive into the application. As you can see, we have all the food categories here, which you can select, and then we have all these featured restaurants, fried chicken, Chinese spice, and all. So, when you click on a restaurant, it will take you to the menu and you can see all the food items which you can add to your cart as well. So let's say I add a burger and chicken wings. And when I click on this, it will open my cart and you can see all the food items that I have picked. The bottom you can see our order price which gets updated whenever we add or remove any item from the cart. So when I place this order, you will see a very cool animation of our rider picking up the food. So let's just place the order. Now our order is placed and now we are seeing the delivery screen where you can see the restaurant's location and the delivery time. By the way, this map is fully functional and this is the arrival time. I've done it until this point where you can place the order. We are not actually placing the order, that is up to you guys. I will build it until this point and this button will cancel the order. Okay, so we'll be learning a lot of things building this application, starting with React Native. We'll be using Expo to make this application so you can run the application on your device. We'll be using React Native navigation to navigate between different pages and models. Then we'll be using Redux Toolkit, which a lot of you guys struggle with. I'll show you how easy it is to implement this. We'll be using Native Wind to style our application. Native Wind is just a package built on top of the Tailwind CSS. So we'll be using Tailwind classes to implement our design. It's very easy to use. Then the last and very important thing that we will learn is Sanity. Sanity is just a content management system where you can store all your data as we'll be doing in this application. You can store your data and manage your data from the backend. As you can see, in our application we have all these categories and all these restaurants data that we are pulling from the backend. It's actually coming from the Sanity backend. So if I move to Sanity Studio, you will see all these data, restaurants, dishes, categories. And if I open the restaurant, you will see all the properties in that restaurant like reviews, categories, and dishes. So it is very easy to add this data and fetch this data on the front end. Now let me show you a very cool feature of our application. So let's get back to this application and here you can see we have implemented a orange color theme in our application. So you can see we have this orange button and all the text is orange. All the restaurants have this orange shade. If I open a restaurant, you will see all the buttons are orange. So the point is everywhere you see, we'll be following an orange theme. And the cool thing is you can change all this in just one click. So if I change the color scheme from to this will change all the colors in that application. Even if I go back, you will see all the buttons and all the colors have changed. So this is very cool. You can use multiple color options in your theme, and once you choose the one you like, you can just save it and it will change the colors throughout the application. So this is very cool. Let's complete our order. Three burgers, yes, place order. Obviously, you cannot change the colors of this animation, but you can use your own animations. Even the pin in the map have the color of our theme. So all the colors have changed, all the shades and all the buttons, very cool stuff. So if you want to grow your React Native skills and create amazing apps like this, then subscribe the channel and follow me along. I will teach you everything you need to create this application. We'll start creating the React Native project and this is the React Native website. You can visit it for documentation. So let's get started. There are two ways. One is CLI and one is expo. We'll be using expo. We'll use this command. Just copy it and open the terminal. Let me create a project folder. We'll have two set of folders, one for the client and server. So also make sure you install Node.js, otherwise this command won't work. Let's just name it client. Okay, so this will create all the boilerplate code for our application. Just wait a second and it will be finished. Okay, so this is finished. Now we'll be using VS Code to open this project. I've already opened the project. Here's the project. So just close the terminal and let's see the boilerplate code. Actually, let's just run the application first to see what it looks like. Just cd to clients folder and use npm run ios. This will actually run the application on your iOS device. Make sure you also set up the xcode for that. Okay, so the application is running. Let me just show you the iOS device. Okay, here it is, and it's actually building. Just give it a second and it will run our application. Okay, so our application is working, and as you can see, this code is coming from app.js. This is the default component. Let me just change this to code with Nomi, and you will see it is auto reloading. So whenever I make a change, it will auto reload the application. So now let's create some folders. I will be using images in this folder, and now let's create a components folder. We'll store all the components in this folder. Then we need a screens folder to hold all our screens. We also need a theme folder to hold all our theme configuration like backgrounds and text colors. So let's create an index file as well. Okay, we will also be using Redux in our application to store user and restaurant data. So let's create slices folder. We'll be using ReduxToolkit. This is it for the folder structure. Now we will need some images throughout the application. So I've already downloaded some of the assets. So let me just copy and paste them in here. Okay, so these are the images that we'll be using in our application. I will leave the link of these resources in the video description. We'll be adding Tailwind CSS into a React Native application. We'll be using a third-party library NativeWind that uses Tailwind CSS to start React Native. Go to the Expo tab and we need to install this library called NativeWind. Open the terminal and just type npm install NativeWind. We also need to install Tailwind CSS, so just copy this and install Tailwind CSS as well. Now we need to add Tailwind configuration into our project. For that, we'll be using this command. Here is the command npx tailwind init. This will create a Tailwind configuration file into our project. Just open the terminal and copy paste this command, and it has created a Tailwind configuration file. We need to change the contents of this file so that we can use the Tailwind classes into our project. These are all the directories that will use Tailwind CSS classes, so make sure that you enlist all the directories in which you will be using Tailwind CSS classes. So just copy this directory path and we need to change it to our directories, like we have a directory screens, and we'll be adding one more directory components because we have a components folder. Okay, so after that we need to move to the next step, which is adding the Babel configuration. So just copy the plugins and open the Babel configuration file and paste the plugins here. After you change the Babel configuration, you need to restart your project so that all the changes can be applied, and that's it. We have integrated Tailwind CSS into our project. Now it's time to test it. So just add a class name. Let's make this text red. It changed to red. That means our implementation is successfully working. Now let me just make it a little bigger. Okay, so that's how you can use Tailwind CSS classes into your application. Now you can remove these styles and you can start using the Tailwind classes to design your application. We're going to add React Native navigation into our project. So let's get started. First, we will need to install some packages. So just copy this command. This will install React navigation. Open the terminal and paste it here like this. And because we're using expo, we need to use these packages. Otherwise, you can copy the button command. Just paste it here. Okay, so then we need to move forward, and this is the navigation container, but we'll get to this in a second. And lastly, we need to install native stack. Just copy this and paste it in the terminal. Okay, so the packages are installed. Now we need to add navigation. So we need to import these two libraries. Just copy them here, and we need to create a navigation file. Let's copy them here, and then we need to create a stack, and we need a functional component. Let me just change the name, navigation. Okay, then we need to import this navigation container code. Now we will need to create these screens, home screen, because we haven't created them. So home screen. Let's create one more file for the restaurant screen. Okay, now we can add them to the navigation. So let me just import the home screen, and we need one more screen for the restaurant screen. Okay, so let's get back to the app component and use the navigation. So we don't need this code, and we also don't need this code. Let's just import the navigation container here, and when we save this, it will show the home screen. Let's just reload. Okay, so navigation is working, but we don't need these headers. So let's just move to navigation, and we can provide some options in the navigator. So let's just use screen options. And there's a property to hide these headers shown. Just set this to false, and this will hide the headers. But now we have this notch area that is conflicting with the content. So just move to the home screen, and we can use a component safe area view. This will push the content a little down so that it won't conflict with the notch area. We are going to design home screen, so let's get started. Let's give it a background of white, and let's make our status bar black, bar style to content dark. Okay, looking nice. Now we are going to add a search bar here. I'll not be teaching all of the Tailwind CSS classes because there are a lot of them, so but I'll be teaching enough so that you can design almost anything. You can visit the Tailwind website and you can check out all the classes there. Okay, so we are going to have a bar here. We'll have a search icon and a text box. So let's just center them and give it a padding, and it should be rounded, and let's add a border of gray. Okay, so now we are going to add an icon here, but for that we need to add some icon library. So we're going to use React Native feather icons. They're very easy to use. Just copy this and run into the terminal. You also need to install React Native SVG. I've already installed them, so I don't need to install them. Just copy this and use it here. And the way you can add icon here is icon dot the name of the icon and give it a height and a width of the icon and the color of the icon. Okay, so looking nice. Now we need to have a text input here. So the text input, and we need a place for the restaurants, and let's give it a margin left and flex 1 so that it should take the whole space. Okay, so the next thing is to add a location icon and the location of the user. Okay, so let's add a view for that. Let's give it a space of 1 and a border of gray for the left. Okay, adding left of 2 and border left gray of 300. Okay, so let's add a map icon here. Map pin, height of 20 and the width of 20, the color of gray. And then we're going to have a text saying the location of the user. Let's say New York. Okay, so our search bar is completed. Now we need to have a sliders icon here for the restaurants filter. So let's add an icon here. It should be rounded. So icon is sliders, height of 20 and the width of 20. Let's give it a stroke width of 2.5 and this color should be white. Okay, for now let's use the background color of gray, but we are going to use our own theme colors. So let's create a file. I think we already have a file, so let's add our theme colors, and let me just copy and paste these colors here. Notice that the background color receives an opacity to control the opacity of the color, so we're going to use that. So let's remove these and try our theme colors dot background color, and let's give it a capacity of 1. Okay, so our search bar part is finished. Now let's move to designing our categories. This will be the main content area, and it will be a scroll bar to scroll the categories and all the featured restaurants. Let's give it a padding bottom. Okay, so now let's add a component here. We'll add all the categories in a different component. Categories. But first let's create the component categories, and let's just add a basic function and use that here. Okay, so for the categories, we'll be using dynamic values for all the categories coming from the Sanity, but for now, because we haven't implemented Sanity yet, so for now we'll be using dummy data. So let's just create a file. Let's create a folder constants, and we will create a file to hold all our dummy data for all the categories and the restaurants. So here I've pasted all the categories and restaurants. You can see all the categories have a name and an image and ID, and we have all these featured restaurants, and all the featured rows has these restaurants, and all the restaurants have these dishes. So if I open this restaurant, you can see all the dishes and all the images data is there. So for now we'll be using this dummy data, but later we'll be adding Sanity, so all the data will be dynamic. Okay, so let's start designing our categories. Let's give it a margin top. Let's add a scroll view for all the categories. This will be horizontal, and this option will hide the scroll bar. Let's give it an overflow of visible, because we will be adding a shadow. So if we don't give this property, then the shadow will be contained in the container, so we need to give that. And here we need to map through all the categories. These are the categories, and we map through all of them and show them one by one. Okay, so let's return a view. Key should be index, and let's style it, justify center and item center. Let's give it a margin height of 6, and add touchable opacity, padding, and should be rounded. So here we give this shadow. Okay, for now add the background of gray, but later it will be dynamic. So let's display the category name. Okay, so all of our categories are displaying, but we also need an image. So let's add an image for each category. Let's give it a width of 45 and height of 45, and add the source of the image, category dot image. Okay, so it doesn't look good, but we'll fix this in a second. Okay, so now we need to add a function here, so that when you click on a category, this will highlight that category. So we need to have a state for active category. By default this will be null, and when user presses on the category, we will set the category ID here, category dot ID. Okay, so now we can use this category to highlight the selected category. We'll check if the current category is active. Then we can add a button class, which is if the category is selected, then the background should be a little dark, and otherwise it will be a light gray. Okay, and let's add a text class if the category is active. Font should be semi bold and text should be gray 800, less gray. Okay, so let's use these dynamic classes here. um, let's wrap these inside curly brackets, and let's add our dynamic class for button, and let's do the same for the text class. Use state is not defined. We need to import use state. Okay, so now everything looks good, but this text should be outside the touchable opacity. Okay, so everything looks good. When I select the category, it should go a little dark, and all the others should have a little light gray color. Everything looks perfect. The scroll bar is working. Okay, so our next step is to show our featured rows. All the featured rows should show the restaurants. So let's move to the next step. We'll have all the featured rows here. Featured. This is the featured section, and we will have a view with the, let's give it a margin top of 5. I've only added one feature object, so I'll be using that multiple times. So let's create an array for 3 objects, and we'll be using that, but don't worry, we'll be replacing this when we implement Sanity. So just go with the flow for now. Return, and this should return the featured row, which we haven't created yet. So let's create a featured row. Featured row, and let's create a functional component. Featured row, if I can spell it. Yeah, so featured row here, and we need to pass the key index and the title of the featured row, restaurants, because all the featured rows have all the list of restaurants, so we'll be passing that, and a description, item dot description. Okay, so we're already seeing the featured row on the screen, so let's move to it and design it. First we need to receive all the title, description, and restaurants. Okay, so the next part is to show the title and the description. Let's add a view for that. Next row, justify between, item center. Okay, let's add a view for the title and description. Let's add a text, and it should be bold, large. Okay, we're seeing the title, and let's add a text for the description as well. It should be small and have a color of gray. Let's add a text small. Okay, so description here. Okay, so we can see the description. Now we need to add a view for see all button. Let's add a touchable opacity. Let's add a text for see all. Okay, we need to give it a color of our theme, so we'll be using the color from our theme, text color, and it should be a little bold. Okay, looking nice. Now let's move to the next part and add our restaurants. We'll add a scroll view. It should be horizontal, and let's hide the scroll bars like this, and let's give it a padding horizontally 15. Okay, the overflow should be visible because we're going to add a shadow for each card. So restaurants. So let's map through all of the restaurants and show them here. Restaurant and index. So we're going to return our restaurant card, which we haven't created yet. So let's create a restaurant card here. Restaurant card, basic functional component. Okay, so let's import it here and pass our restaurant as an item. I think I spelled it wrong. This should be restaurant like this, and let's add the key here, index, and that's it. Now we are also already seeing the restaurant cards here, so let's move to it and design it. We'll be adding touchable without feedback because later we're going to navigate through these cards to the restaurant screen, so we don't need that feedback here. Okay, so let's design our restaurant card. It should be rounded and should have a shadow of large. And the first thing we need to do is display an image of the restaurant. Class name, height of 36 and width of 64, and it should be rounded at the top. Let's add the we need to import the item as well. Item.image. Okay, we're seeing the restaurant images, so now we need to add a view for the restaurant information like name and description. Class name should have a padding bottom as well, and a spacing vertical. Now let's add a text for the restaurant name. Okay, we are seeing the restaurant name. Let's design it. It should be a little large and font should be bold. Let's get a padding top of 2. Okay, now let's add some information about this restaurant. We're going to display all the stars and all the reviews data here. To display the stars, we need to show a star image here, which I've already included in the project. So just use the full star image here. Assets/images full star png, and give it a height of 4 and a width of 4. Okay, so let's use the stars data. Should be green, and here we need to show the stars. Okay, we are seeing the stars data, and we also need to show the reviews. This should be gray. Now let's display our reviews here. Item.reviews. Let's add a review text as well. Now let's add the type of the restaurant. It should be a little bold, semi-bold, and item.type. I think it is the category, so let's use category. Okay, so we're seeing the category. Now next part is to show the restaurant address at the bottom. So we will create a new view here at the bottom, and this is a class name of flex. Items should be centered and spacing of horizontal. Now we need to show the icon here, but let's import the icons from home screen. Let's copy them here, and we are going to use the map pin icon here, icon.mappin, and let's give it a height and width and a color. Width of 15 and a height of 15. Okay, we can see the icon, and let's add a text for the address of the restaurant. should be small. Nearby, let's copy this dot here. Item dot address. Okay, so our code is almost finished. Now only thing left to do is add a shadow color from our theme. So let's add a shadow color. Theme dot background color. Let's give it a opacity of 0.2. And to spread it, let's add a shadow radius of 7. Okay, so you can see the shadow around all the cards. All the categories are working and all the restaurant cards are working. The scrollables are working. We are going to design the restaurant screen, and for that we need to pass the restaurant data. So we're going to use the onPress function here, and we need to use the use navigation hook to navigate to the restaurant screen. And we're going to use the navigate method here, restaurant screen, and we need to pass the restaurant data as well, like this. Okay, so I've already created the restaurant screen, so let's import the restaurant data here. You can use the use route hook to get the data that we passed through the restaurant card. So now let's console log this data to check if you're getting the data. So restaurant. Okay, if we save this and move to the restaurant, okay, we're seeing the data in the console. That means we are getting the data. Now let's remove this and design the restaurant screen. Let's move this, and we're gonna have a scroll view here, and in this view it should be relative, and we're gonna have an image of the restaurant with a full and height of 72 and source of the item dot image. We haven't imported the image, so let's do that. Okay, great, we're seeing the image. So now let's design the back button. Touchable opacity, and let's design this button first. Absolute, because we're going to show it at the top. Left 4, padding 2, and should be rounded full. Okay, so now we're going to use an icon here. So for that, let's just copy the icon from home screen. This. Okay, we're going to use the arrow left icon. Stroke width of 3. Stroke of theme colors. We're going to use a theme color here, like this. Okay, we have a back button. So now let's make it functional. Use our navigation method here. We will use the go back method on the navigation. It will take the user back to the previous screen. So let's test it. Okay, so nice, it's working. Now let's design the next part, which is we're going to have a container here. This container will have all the rounded corners at the top. So we're going to give it a border radius of top left and top right. Border top right radius 40, like this. And let's give it a background of white as well. Let's give it a minus margin on the top because it's going to overlap on the restaurant image. So if I save this, you can see it, but when we show the restaurant name, it's going to look good. So let's add a view for the restaurant screen and all the details about the restaurant. Let's add the restaurant name. One should be bold. Item dot name. Okay, now it's looking good. Now for the next part, we're going to display all the data that we used in the restaurant card. So let's just copy that from here. We're going to use these views because these are the stats of the restaurant. So let's just copy these here. We're going to have a container view for these to flex them. So let's just leave it like that and use the spacing horizontally. Okay, so let's copy these here. Let me just correct the indentation. Okay, looking good. Now we got all the reviews, the food category and the location of the restaurant. So the only thing left to do is add a description of the restaurant. So let's do that. We're going to add item.description here. Okay, so we're showing the description. The next part is to show the menu of the restaurant. So let's add a view for that. 36 and background of white. So let's just add a text of menu here. Padding vertical. The text should be 2XL. Menu. And under the menu, we're going to display all the dishes because all the restaurants have a list of dishes. So we're going to map through all of them and show all the dishes here. Dish and index. We'll use another component dish row here, which we haven't created yet. So let's just create the dish row component. Dish row. And let's import it here and pass the dish data. Item is going to be dish and the key is going to be the index. Okay, we already seeing the dish row, so let's move to the dish row and design it. First we need to get the item. Let's add the view for the dish card. So item should be center, background of white, padding of 3, it should be rounded, shadow of 2XL, and then margin bottom of 3 and margin horizontally 2. Okay, so now we're going to have a view for the image. So let's just use the image. The image should be rounded and style should be 100 height and 100 width. Okay, so let's add the source of the image, item.image, and now we're seeing the image. Nice. Now let's add the dish description and the dish name. Let's add a view for that. Flex one because this is going to expand through all of the width. Let's add a view for the title and the description. Text should be XL. Item.name. Okay, we're seeing the name. Now let's add the description of the dish. Text gray of 700. Item.description. You're getting the description. Okay, nice. Now let's add a view for the price of the dish, and we're going to have two buttons for adding the dish to the cart. So let's add a view for that. Item should be centered. Text gray 700, and text should be large and fonts should be bold. Okay, so let's add the item price. Let's add a dollar sign as well. Let's remove the space. Okay, so in this view we're going to have two buttons, one for adding the item to cart and one for removing it. So let's add touchable opacity. Let's design it. Padding of 1, it should be rounded full. And we're going to add the background color from our theme colors. So let's add a style, background color, and the opacity should be 1. Okay, we are seeing a dot. We're going to use the icon here. I think we haven't imported the icon, so let's just copy them from home screen. Copy them here. Okay, we're going to use the minus icon here. Minus. Let's give it a stroke width of 2 and height of 20 and width of 20, and the color should be white. Equals white. Okay, so we're seeing that. So now let's just copy this and paste it one more time, because it should be plus button Okay, so now in the middle we're going to add a text to show how many items we have added in the cart. So let's just say 2 for now, but we will change that later, because later when we implement the Redux we're going to display this data from Redux. Okay, so our restaurant screen is almost finished. The only thing left to do is add a cart icon. So when we move to the restaurant screen, we're going to add a cart icon here. So let's create a component for that. Let's name it cart icon, functional component cart icon here, and we're going to use that here. Okay, so you can see the cart icon here. Let's move to it and design it. We're going to give it the absolute position so that we can place it wherever we want. We're going to display it at the bottom. Width should be full and z index should be 50. Okay, next we're going to add a touchable opacity, because it's going to be a button that will open a model to list all the items in the cart. Let's use a color from our theme. Now let's flex this so that we're going to have a button and the price. So justify between and items center. Let's give it a margin horizontally and it should be rounded full. Let's add a shadow as well. So shadow of large. Okay, next we're going to add a view for the number of items added in the cart. So let's add that. Should be text. Font should be extra bold. And text should be white and large. Okay, let's say 3 for now, but we will change that later. So let's make it rounded full, and let's give it a background of white with an opacity of 0.3. Okay, now it's looking good. Next we're going to add a view card text, so it should be text centered, fonts extra bold, and text should be white, and let's make it a little big. View card. Okay, so the next and the last thing is to add the total amount of the card items. So font should be extra bold, text should be white, and text large. Okay, so we're going to use a dummy value here, but later we will change that when we add the Redux. Okay, so we have finished the restaurant screen as well. We are displaying the dishes and the restaurant data. This icon is only going to show when user have added any item into the cart. So if he hasn't, then we will show it like this. Otherwise, it will show the cart icon. We are going to design our cart and delivery screens, but before that we need to make our status bar visible, because currently it's in dark mode, so we need to make it light. And for that we are going to use a status bar component, and we're going to style it light. Okay, now we can see all the fonts. Now when we click on this button, we're going to open a cart model. So let's create a cart screen. Now let's add it to navigation. Just copy this route and name it to cart. Let's import the cart screen. Okay, now we're going to use some options here to define it as a model. Set the presentation to model like this. Now let's get back to the cart icon and define an onPress method here, and we need to define an onPress method, and we're gonna use a navigation hook, and now we can navigate to the cart like this. Now when I press this button, it should open a model. Yep, the model is working. So let's get back to the cart screen. Now because we haven't implemented Sanity yet, so we're going to use our dummy data, which is here. We're going to use this first restaurant from the featured. So let's import it here, const restaurant, and we're going to get the first restaurant from featured restaurants and get the first object. Okay, now let's design our component. Let's give it a background of white, flux 1, and now we're going to add a back button here. So let's add a view for that. It's going to be relative because we're going to make our back button absolute. So let's add a button, touchable opacity. Let's give it a color of our own theme. Background color, opacity should be 1, and class name. This is going to be absolute, and let's give it a z index of 10, and it should be rounded. Top of 5 and left of 2. Okay. Now let's add an icon. So for that we are going to copy the icons library from home. Let's copy it here. Icons dot arrow left. Stroke width of 3 and stroke of white. Okay, now we can see the button, but let's make it functional. Let's add an on press method, and we're going to use navigation dot go back method. It will take us back to the previous screen. We haven't added navigation, so let's add that. Navigation, use navigation. Okay, so now when we press this, it closes the model. Okay, now it's working. Now let's add a text view for the restaurant name and this description. Text and gloss text should be centered and font should be bold. Text large, your cart, and we're going to add a restaurant name below. Text should be centered and text should be gray of 500. Okay, and here we're going to display the restaurant name like this, looking nice. Now next we are going to add our delivery time. Let's add a view for that, and we're going to give it a slight background color from our theme. Let's give it 0.2 opacity, and we're going to flex them because there will be an image and the time of the delivery. Okay, now let's add an image. We already have an image in the assets. Assets in the image, and it's called bikeguy.png. Okay, let's give it a height and the width 20 and width of 20. Okay, it should be rounded full. Okay, let's remove this because it's a self-closing tag. Now you can see the delivery guy, and next thing we're going to add a text for the delivery time. Should take the full space. Delivery in 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, and now next we're gonna have a button to change that. Text, class name of fonts bold, and it's going to be the color of our theme. It should say change like this. Okay, so this part is done. Now we're going to display the list of dishes. So let's add a scroll view for that. Show vertical scroll bar false, and let's give it a padding bottom of 50. And now let's add a class for the background of white and padding top of 5. Okay, so now we're going to map through all of the dishes and show them one by one. Restaurant dishes map. Okay, we're going to return a view. Let's design the view. Okay, now let's add a class name for the flex row. Item should be centered in space of horizontal padding, background of white, should be rounded 3xl, and margin bottom, and a little shadow. Okay, so now we're going to first display a number of the items in the cart. So let's add a text for that. Text should be bold, style should be the color from our theme. Okay, let's say true multiplied for now, and we're going to display the dish image. Height of 14, width of 14, should be rounded full. Okay, let's add a source, and it's going to be dish.image like this. Now when we save this, you can see we have all these cards and the number of the items in the card. So next, let's display the dish name and the description. Font should be bold and text should be gray of 700. Okay, dish name here. And next thing we need to add is the price of the dish. So it should be font semi-bold, text should be base, and price is going to be dish.price. Okay, so the last thing we need to add is a minus button to remove the item from the cart. So it should have a padding and should be rounded full. And let's give it a style from our background colors theme. Opacity should be full. Okay, so let's add an icon. Should be minus. Stroke width of 2 and the height should be 20. And width should be 20 as well. And stroke of white like this. Okay, so the next part is to show the calculation view for all the items in the card. So let's add a view under the scroll view. It should show totals view, and then with the class name, let's add a padding 6 and padding horizontally 8. Rounded top should be 3XL because it's going to be rounded at the top corners, and space vertical should be 3 or 4. Okay, so let's add a style and give it a background of our theme, and the opacity should be 0.2. Now we can see it, but let's add a content to it. Let's add a view for subtotal. Should flex row and justify between, and we're going to add a text with the gray color, text gray of 700, and it's going to display subtotal. Let's just copy this one more time and show another 20. Okay, so we're also going to show the delivery fee and total order price. So let's just copy this subtotal 2 more times and change this to delivery fee, and it should be order total. Okay, let's give it 30. Let me save this where we have this nice summary. So let's make this extra bold, and the order total should be extra bold as well. Okay, so the last thing we need to add is a place order button. So let's add that. Let's add a view for that, and we're going to add touchable opacity. Let's give it a style and background color from our theme. Opacity should be full, and let's add a class name for the padding, and rounded should be full. Okay, let's add a text. Let's design the text. Text should be white and text should be centered. Font should be bold and large. Okay, so it should say place order. Okay, so this screen is finished. Now the flow is going to be like this. When user opens the app, he will see restaurants. He will open the restaurant, add some items to the cart, view the cart, and then he will go to the delivery screen. But before we go to the delivery screen, we're going to show the user that your order is preparing. So when we click on this button, we're going to move to a screen which is called order preparing. So let's get navigation to that order preparing like this, and we're going to add our order preparing screen. Order preparing screen. Let's add a function, and we're also going to add to navigation, and it's going to be a full screen model, so it will pop up from the bottom. Full screen model like this, and let's import it. Okay, now when we click on this place order button, the model should pop up like this. Now let's go to the model and design it. We're going to have just one image here, so let's just flex it to make it centered. Background of white, justify centered, and item centered. Okay, now we're going to add the image here. The image is going to be animated, so let's add a source. require from assets, and the image is called delivery.gif. Okay, let's add a width and height 80 like this, and when I save this you can see the nice animated image here. But we are going to show it only for 3 seconds, so let's add a use effect hook so that when this component mounts it will only show it for the 3 seconds, and then we'll move to the delivery screen. And a set timeout, it's going to be for 3000 milliseconds, and we're going to move to the delivery screen. So let's add a navigation, use navigation hook, and we're going to navigate to delivery, which we haven't created yet. So when I save this, you'll see we get an error because we haven't created delivery screen. So let's create a delivery screen like this and just create a function. Let's save it, and now let me refresh it. Now we'll be redirected to delivery screen. Place an order, and oh, I think we haven't added it to the navigation, so let's add the delivery screen to navigation as well. It's also going to be a full screen model. So delivery, and import it here. Okay, so now let's refresh it and test it one more time. Place order. Now after 3 seconds we are going to delivery screen. Okay, now let's design our delivery screen. We're also going to need our restaurant data here, so let's import it from the featured restaurants. Let's choose the first restaurant, and we're also going to need navigation, so let's import it here. Okay, now let's design our restaurant. We're going to add a map view here, and for that we're going to use a library called React Native Maps. So we're going to use this library. You can install it using this command. I've already installed it. It's pretty easy to use. Here are some examples. So let's move here. We have already copied this. Let's use the map view, and we're going to assign initial region in which we are going to add latitude and longitude. We already have that in our restaurant data, so let's use that. And then we also need to define latitude delta. This is just zooming levels, so let's just use 0.01 for now. And let's add a class name of flex1 so that it should take the full space, and the map type should be standard. Okay, so inside the map view we're going to show a marker for the restaurant's location, and we're going to give it a coordinates of the same latitude and longitude. Okay, so when I save this you will see we have an error. Let's just refresh it and see if it resolves the issue. Okay, so the map is working and we can see the pin on the restaurant's location. So let's add more info on the pin. Title should be restaurant's name, and description should be restaurant's description. And we're also going to color the pin. So pin color should be the color from our theme, background color of opacity 1. Okay, when I save this you can see the pin color changed, and when I click this you will see the restaurant name and the description. Next we are going to design our delivery information. So let's add a view for that, and it's going to be rounded at the top. Margin top should be in the negative so that it overlaps on the map view. Let's add another view for the delivery times. Justify between and the padding horizontal and padding top. Okay, so text should say the arrival time. Text should be gray of 700, and font should be semi-port. Estimated arrival time. Okay, it's displaying but it's at the bottom, so let's add more content. Next we're going to display the delivery time. Text should be large and font should be extra bold, and text should be gray of 700. 20 to 30 minutes. And next we need to say that your order is on its way. So let's add a text for that. Margin top and text should be gray of 700. Font semi-bold. Your order is on its way. Okay, so next we're going to add an image for our delivery guy. And it's going to be an animated GIF. So let's design it. Width should be 24 and height should be 24. Assets and images, and the image is called bike guide 2.gif. Okay, so we can see the GIF. Now let's add another view for our actual rider. So let's add a background color of our theme color and give it a opacity of 0.8. Now let's design it. Give it a padding, flex row, justify between, and items should be centered and it should be rounded full. Give it a vertical padding, margin and horizontal margin. Okay, so as you can see the view, but let's add the image of our rider. Rounded should be full style and give it a background of white but with a less opacity, 0.4. Like this. And inside this view we're going to add the rider image, height of 16 and width of 16 and rounded full, and the source should be from assets and images delivery guy.png. Let's move it to the next line like this. Now when I save this, we can see our delivery guy, which is me. And moving forward, we are going to add the rider name. So let's add a view for that. It should be flex 1 because it's going to take all the space. So text should be text large, font should be bold, and text should be white. Say it on. And let's add a text for your rider. Let's just copy this. It will say your rider, and we'll remove this. Okay, so looking nice. So let's just add font semi-bold. Okay, nice. So the next part is to add two buttons. So let's add a view for that. Flex row, items centered, and spacing of horizontal 3 and a little margin. Okay, so let's add touchable opacity because they're going to be a button. So let's design them. Background of white, the padding and rounded should be full. So we're going to add an icon here. Let's copy the icon library from home screen. Let's copy them here. Okay, so we're going to use phone icon, phone, and we're going to fill this with the color of our theme. Background color with full opacity and stroke width should be 1. And let's see. Okay, so we also need to give it the stroke color of our theme. So let's add that. Okay, looking nice. Now let's just copy this one more time. And we're going to show a button for canceling the order. So let's use the X icon and let's change the color stroke to red and give the stroke width of 5. Too aggressive, let's use 4. Okay, so looking nice. Now when I click this button, we're going to go back to the home screen. So let's add an on press method. Let's use our navigation and we're going to navigate to home screen like this. So let's save this and let's see if it's working. Okay, so we're moving back to the home screen. With this, our application design is complete. We have all these categories, featured restaurants. User can add the item to the cart and view the cart. And when we place this order, you will see this beautiful animation. So after this, we will see the delivery screen on which we have this fully functional map. with all the restaurant data. We are going to add Redux Toolkit into our application. So let's get started. Go to this website and jump over to Quick Start menu. Then you need to install these packages. I've already installed them. Then we need to create a store into our application. So this is a sample code. Just copy this code and let's create a store file into our root directory and copy this here. Now next we need to provide this store to our application. So for that we'll be using a provider component. So we'll be just copying this and use it into our app.js, and we need to wrap this provider around the navigation. So we'll be using store that we just created, and we need to wrap this around the navigation like this. Okay, so it says not a valid reducer because we haven't created any. So let's move to the reducers and create a slice. We already have a counter slice component here, so we'll just copy this. Just copy this whole component and let's create our slices. We will have two slices, restaurant slice and a card slice. Okay, so let's move to restaurant slice, and first we need to change this to restaurant slice. So let's just change this, and the name should be restaurant. We'll be using a restaurant value, so let's just change this to restaurant, and by default this restaurant will be null like this. Okay, so these are the reducers plus actions, so we won't be needing all of them. Let's just remove these and change this to set restaurant like this, and we'll pause a restaurant and set the restaurant value to action.payload. We also need to export this, so let's remove these and export set restaurant. Okay, so the last thing we need to add is add a function that returns us this restaurant. So let's create a select restaurant method. This will receive the root state, and from the root state we can call this restaurant slice and then return the restaurant value like this. Okay, so this is finished. Now let's just copy this whole slice into card slice. Let's change these values. We will have card items as an empty array initially. So let's change this to card slice, and the name should be card. Now let's change this to add to cart, and we will have three actions. So let's just copy this and change this to remove from cart and empty cart. Okay, so in the first action we will add the item to items. So let's just create a new array with old items and add the action.payload. That will be the new item. Now let's implement remove from cart feature, and the first thing we need to do is store all the cart items. So let's create a variable new cart and we'll store all the items. And now we need to find the index of the item that we need to remove. So we'll use find index, and we need to match the ID of the item. So let's match to action.payload.id like this. And if we find the item, that means if the index is greater than or equal to 0, that means the item is found. Then we remove the item, otherwise we'll just show a message. So we will just splice this new card and remove that item from the array, item index and 1. Okay, so otherwise we will just message that can't remove the item that is not added to the card. Okay, so then we need to set this new card as well. So item should be new card. Okay, so what happens is we have all the card items, and then we find the index of the item that we want to remove, and then we remove it, and then we update the items. So in the empty card we will just set the items to empty array like this. Now we need to export these actions as well, so let's add them here. Remove from card and empty card like this. Okay, so the same thing that we did in the restaurant slice, we need to add some functions that will select the card data. So let's add a select card items method. This will receive a root state and we will return the card items. So card.items like this. We'll have another method to select the items by ID. So select card items by ID We'll pass the state and the ID. This will return a filtered array of all the items that matches this ID. Item not ID should be ID. Okay. So the last thing we need to add is the card total. So we will just calculate all the card items and then return a value. Let's add a function select card total and we'll pass the state. Then we need to calculate the price of all the items. We will use a reduce method which will have a previous value as total and then the current iteration item, and we will return the total equals total plus the item price, and the initial value for this total value should be 0. So what this will do is iterate through all of the items and update this total variable and then return the total price. Okay, so let's add these reducers to our store. Card slice and restaurant slice. Now we need to move to the restaurant screen, and when user moves to the restaurant we need to set the restaurant data here. So let's move to the restaurant screen and we will dispatch an action here. Let's use a use effect hook so that when component mounts we will set the restaurant data in Redux. So like here we'll use the dispatch hook. Dispatch, the hook is called use dispatch. Now we will check if the restaurant has the data and ID restaurant item, and the item ID is there. Then we will set the restaurant into the Redux. We can set the restaurant like this. We will use our set restaurant action that we created earlier. So this is the set restaurant action. As you can see, we are exporting it here. So now we need to pass the item as an object. So we'll pass the item like this, and this will set the restaurant into a Redux. Now, whenever user moves to the restaurant screen, the restaurant is being set into a Redux, and now we can use that. So we will use the restaurant data here to show the restaurant name. So let's move to the card screen, and we will use a use selector hook. This returns us a root state, and from the root state we can get the restaurant slice like state.restaurant. This is the restaurant slice, and another restaurant will be the restaurant value. So we can use it like this, or we can use our own method that we created, select restaurant. This will work the same because we're still passing the root state and returns the restaurant data. So when I save this, you won't see any change because we are still using the dummy data, but we are saving it into the Redux and then using it from the Redux. So moving next, now we need to add the restaurant data here, because when you click on this pin, you will see the restaurant data is being used here. So let's move to the delivery screen, and we need to remove this dummy data and use the use selector hook to get the restaurant from our Redux state. We'll pass the same method, select restaurant. Now we're getting the restaurant from our Redux. Let's cancel this order and try again. This order. Okay, so this is all working fine, and when you click on this, you will see the restaurant data that is being pulled out from the Redux. So next we're going to work on this area. We need to show the icon when there are any items in the card. So we will make a check in the card icon screen, and let's make a check. If there are no items, we will just return from here. We will use a select card items method like this will return us all the card items, and we will check if the card items length is 0. Then we will return from here. Okay, so you can see the card icon is gone because there are no items in the card. So let's move to this row and add the functions to these buttons. Let's add a method on press handle increase, and let's add a handle decrease method here. Now we need to define these methods. Handle increase, and let's just copy this. Handle decrease. Okay, now we need to dispatch an action here, so we'll use a use dispatch hook, and we already have the item data, so we will just dispatch the action add to cart, and we'll pass the item here. Okay, so now we also need to dispatch remove from card. So let's dispatch that action, remove from card, and we need to pass the item ID like this. Okay, so these should be working now. So let's test them. Now when I press this, you will see the card icon because we are actually adding these items to the Redux. So let's show the total items. We will use selector and we will use our action called select card items by ID, and we need to pass the state and the ID of the item like this, and this will return us the total items for this ID. Now we can use this to show the total items length. Okay, so now when I press this, this will increase the total items as you can see, and when I remove this, this will decrease the items. This is working as expected, but now we need to disable the minus button when there is no item in the card. So let's add a property disabled, and this will be true when there are no total items. So now when I remove all the items, you can see this icon is disabled. So this is all working as expected. Now we need to move to the cart icon and show the cart items and the total value. So let's move to the cart icon. First we will show the number of items in the cart. So we'll use the cart items length, cart items dot length. This will show the total cart items. Then we will use the total cart price, and for that we need to import this as well. Cart total, use selector, and we already have a function select cart total. We'll use this and we'll choose the card total here. Now this screen is finished because we're using all the data from the Redux. Now when I remove or add anything, this will update the card icon, and these items are coming from the Redux. So next we need to move to the card screen and we need to display all these items from the card. So let's move to the card screen, and we need to get the card items and the card total. So let's add them here. Card items, we can use our own method card select card items, and similarly we need to get the card total. Now to display all the items, we need to format them into groups because right now all of the items are in one array. So we'll use the use effect hook. We will format them into an object where each key will contain a list of items with the same IDs. So let's create a state for grouped items. By default this will be an empty object. Now we will use the reduce method on all the items to make the groups for each item. This will return us the previous value and the current iteration, and the by default value for the group will be an empty object. Now we'll check if the key in that group has a value or not. If it doesn't have a value, then we will create an array with that item and we will push that item to this array like this. And if it does have a value, then we will just simply push this item to the existing array. That will create a group of all the items with the same ID. Okay, so the result we get will have all the IDs as the keys, and each key will have a list of items with the same IDs. So let's just set it to the grouped items like this. Now we can use this to display the items. We will remove these and we will use a function called object.entries. This will return us an array of arrays in which we will get the key value pairs, and in each key value pair the key will be the ID and the value will be the list of items with that ID. So let's use them here. Okay, so first let's use the key here. We'll remove the index and use the key here. Now using the items value, we can display how many items are in the cart. So let's remove this dummy data and use the items.length here to display how many items are in the cart. Okay, so to use this dish, well, let's use the first object in the items. Okay, so when I save this, you will see all of this data is now getting from the Redux and not this dummy data. So let's add more data and view our card. Now all of this data is coming from the Redux and it's correct. Now let's implement this minus button. This will reduce the quantity of the items. Let's use dispatch method here. First we need to import the use dispatch hook like this. And now we can use the remove from cart method here to decrease the cart item. And we need to pass the ID of the item as well. Okay, so hopefully this should all work. So when I remove this, as you can see, the quantity decreased. So now when I keep removing the item, this will remove all the items from the cart. So this is all working. Now let's move to this area and show the total price of the cart items. So we will use the cart total value here. This will be the subtotal of the cart. And when I save this, you can see this is already being populated. So for the delivery, let's add a variable here to add our delivery fee. Delivery fee will be 2 and we'll use that here. And for the total order price will be the delivery fee plus the cart total, like this. Okay, so when I save this, all of this data will be working. So let's move back and add more items. Let's move this and add 4 items. Okay, so now this is showing all perfectly fine and all the data is being calculated. Now let's place this order and this is all working as well. Now the last thing we need to add is a empty cart method. So when we cancel this order, we need to empty the cart. So let's move to the delivery screen and we need to make a function on this button. So let's just copy this and we will add cancel order. Let's define our cancel order method here. Okay, so now we also need to dispatch an action empty card. So let's use dispatch method and we will remove all the card items when user cancels this order. Now when I press this button, this will cancel the order and remove all the card items. So let's just try this one more time. Add the items, view the card and place the order. Now let's cancel this. And when I move to the restaurant, you won't see any card icon because all the card items were removed. Okay, so our Redux implementation is done and it's working perfectly fine. We are saving all the data to Redux. We are going to add Sanity into our application. So Sanity is basically a content management system and we are going to use Sanity to store all our applications data and we'll be fetching data from our deployed Sanity project. So let's get started. Go to the sanity.io, go to documentation and getting started, create a project. And if you scroll down, you will find a command here to create the Sanity project. We will use this command to create our project, but make sure that you're logged in with your Google account on Sanity's website. So go to the terminal and let's just copy this command here. Okay, we'll be changing the project name to delivery app like this. And we're also going to remove the template clean part because we'll be choosing a pre-built template. So let's just hit enter. Now I've already logged in with my Google account, so it's not asking me to log in. Project output path, yes, it's a delivery app folder. Now we can choose a clean project without any schemas, but what I like to do is use the blog and it comes with already made schemas and we can just edit them. Now choose N because we are not using TypeScript and our package manager is npm, yes. Now it can take a while to install all these dependencies, but this is not the only way to create a Sanity project. You can create the Sanity project with CLI. So you can use this command to install CLI globally and then you can use this command sanity init. This will create the project just like this where you have to choose all these options. Now just wait a second until all the dependencies are installed. And once this is done, just cd to our delivery app and we're gonna run the Sanity project delivery app and we can use the command npm run dev. This will start our Sanity project. Now it will give us a URL to see our Sanity project. and we have to log in again with our Google account. So let's choose our Google account. Now once you're logged in, you can see your project. Okay, so let's explore our schemas. Just open the delivery app and open the schemas folder. Here you will find all the files for your schemas. Now this category has two fields for schema. One is title and description. Now let's create a new category. If we hit this icon, you can create a new category and we can name the title and description. And when we publish this, this will save this category to our Sanity project. Now we also be using category because we have category section into our project. So let's just remove these and we will add our own fields. Now first we'll have a name for the category. Type can be string, and we need to provide a title for the category name, and we can also apply validation through validation function, and which gives us a rule, and we can use the required method. This will make this field required so that user have to add this name. Let's just copy this and add description, category description. This is also required, and we will be adding an image. So in the Sanity we have this image type, so we can use image as a field. So let's just add a name for the image. Type will be an image, and let's just add the title, image of the category. Now let's just move to the Sanity Studio and see how this looks like. Let's go to Sanity. This is the old document. Let's just remove this and create a new category. Okay, now you can see all the fields that we just created, and the image property is the image picker that you can use to pick the image from your laptop. Now this was how you can create schemas for your project. Now we will create rest of the schemas. So let's just create a new schema. Let's create a dish schema, and then we will have featured schema, and then lastly we will have restaurant schema. Okay, so let's just go to dish, and let's just copy the category schema and paste here. Category schema here. Let's just copy this into dish schema, and we'll change the name to dish. Title will be dishes, and type of document. So we'll have name, so dish name, and the description, this description, and we'll have the image, and last we'll have the price for this dish. So let's just use the price, and the type will be number, and the image of the category should be price for the dish in USD. Now we also need to define these schemas into our index.js file. We need to define all the schemas here. So far we have two schemas, so let's just define them here, category and dish. Let's just use the dish, it will auto import. Okay, so now if you move to the Sanity Studio, you will see we have dishes. So let's just create a new dish. We can see we have dish name, description, image, and the price. So let's create a new dish. We will have the name test, just for testing purposes. Let's just use a random image of food. And last we're gonna add the price and hit publish. Now this is gonna save this dish to our Sanity Studio. Now I'm not going to create all the types for all the schemas. Instead, I'm just going to copy and paste the restaurant schema here, and I will just explain the restaurant schema to you. Okay, so we have this restaurant schema with the title restaurants. We have these fields with the name, description, and notice that the description has a rule for 200 maximum characters. Then we have image, latitude, longitude, address, which is required, and then we have this validation for this rating, which is this is going to be required, and the minimum should be 1 and the maximum going to be 5. If user enters anything, then we will print please enter a value between 1 to 5. Then we have these reviews, and the last we have these two types of references. In Sanity we can actually create relationships with other schemas as well. So these last two types are the reference types to other schemas. So this one, first one is the reference to category, which we already have this category here. This means we can set the category for the restaurant as well. So then we have this dishes array. So this is an array of references where each item is a reference to the dish, which is here. So this is how you can create schema with other relationships. So let's just move forward and copy the featured schema here. Now we have this feature schema with all the fields. The first field is name, which is required, description is required, and then we have this array of references to the restaurants. So notice that is referencing to the restaurant schema which we just created here. So when I save this, and we need to move to the index, and we need to define all the schemas here, featured and restaurant, like this. Now when I save this and go to Sanity, you will see we have populated all the schemas that we just created. So let's just create a restaurant and see all the fields. Now notice that we have all the fields that we just created. So let's just add KFC, hot and spicy chicken. Let's just choose a random image. I have all the random images in my folder. So let's just use one. This random latitude, longitude, restaurant, that is this 4.2k review. Now for the categories, because it was a reference type, so you'd be able to choose the categories, or you can just create a new category here. Fast food, description fast food, and let's just choose a random image like this and publish this. This is going to save this to category, and now we can choose the category here. And same goes for the dishes, because it was an array of references, so would be able to choose all the dish items here. Let's just choose this one and let's publish. Okay, so this is going to save all your data into Sanity, and that's how you can create all the schemas and save all your data here. What I've done is created a project, and I've added all the dummy data to the project, which is here, and this is a deployed application. So you can see all the restaurants that I've already created. So all the restaurant data is there, all the categories and all the dishes are here. Categories are here, you can see, and we have all these featured restaurants. So I've listed all the restaurants here. Now I'll be using this project for our application because I've added all of the data here, but I've shown you how you can create this project and all the schemas. So I will just show you how you can deploy this project and use it to in your application. So go to the terminal. Let's just end this, and we have this command here to deploy. Just go to that package.json. It's called deploy. So let's just run npm run deploy. It's going to deploy this application into Sanity Studio, and we have to provide a host name. Let's just use delivery app test. It's already taken, so let's add a 0. Okay, so it's going to deploy our application and give us a link of our deployed application. So let's open that, open this, and now we have this fully functional deployed application with Sanity. Now you can see all of your schemas that we just created and all of the data with that we created. So now I'm just going to close this, and we're going to implement Sanity into our front end. So let's just close this, and let's just close this as well. Now we are going to use this project because this has all the data. So let's head back to our Sanity project. Let's close this, and now we need to create a Sanity file into our client, sanity.js, and now we'll be using third-party libraries, which is Sanity client. Just copy this command and run it into your terminal, and we're going to use sanity slash image url. I've already installed them, so I will just import them here. So let's create a Sanity client, const client, and we need to provide some options for project ID that we'll use in a second. Data set will be production, and we'll be using CDN to increase the performance because it will be using cache. API version is the latest, I think. So we'll be exporting this client. Now we need to use this image builder to create the image links. So let's create a builder, and we will use our client like this. And now we need to create a function URL for, we'll pass the image, so that will be the source, and we need to pass that to the image function of the builder. The reason we are doing this is because Sanity stores our images as an object, but we can't use the objects to show the images into our application. So we need to create URLs for all the images, and this is the process for creating the URL for all the images into our application. So we'll be using the URL for function for that. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to do is add codes to our Sanity Studio so that we can make the request from these URLs. So just go to your Sanity project, just run this command sanity codes add and add the URL that you'll be calling from. So let's just add a random URL like this, and this will ask you to allow this region. Just choose yes, and this will add the URL to course. Now we're gonna need a way to fetch the data from Sanity, and that's where grok queries from Sanity comes in. If you ever heard of GraphQL queries, these are very similar to that. So we'll be using query language, which is called grok. So let's see how this works. So basically you have to just provide a type, which will be the document type, and then you can add a condition, and it will fetch the data based on your condition. Then you can add projections, like you can just get the specific data like ID, title, and release year, and this will get the data based on your condition. So let's move to our project, and we can use grok queries into our projects. Just hit the vision icon, and we'll use grok queries. Will get all the categories. So the way we can do that, just add the type equals category and hit fetch. Now this will fetch all the categories from our Sanity project. As you can see, we have this name, description, and the ID. So let's just change this to featured. This will get all the featured restaurants with all the data. Notice that all these restaurant is an array of references. So if we want to get the restaurants data, we need to expand this featured category, and we need to use spread operator to get all the featured data. Then we need to define restaurants array. Because it's an array, we need to use the array symbol, and then we can expand it like this, and then we will use spread operator to get all the restaurants data. So now we'll be getting restaurant data. As you can see, we have all these ratings, description, image, and all the data here. So we're getting the restaurant data. Now we need to define our dishes as well, because for now dishes are the references as well. So let's use the dishes array. We'll add dishes array, and we'll expand them and use the spread operator to get all the dishes. Let's fetch. Now we will get the restaurants, and we will also get the dishes data inside the restaurant. Now we are getting all the data, but if we want to just get the name, you can just specify the name and then fetch. Now we'll be able to see just the name of the dish. Okay, so let's just change this back to spread operator so that we can get all the data. Now we have one more reference as a type. So let's just add the type, and we'll get the name for this type. Let's fetch, and yes, we are getting the type, and we have this name for the type. Okay, so this is how you can use grok queries, and you can fetch the data with all the other relationships as well. So we'll be using this query into our application to fetch the featured restaurants. So let's just head back to our application, and let's create a file api.js. Now we're going to use the Sanity client to call these grok queries. Sanity client from the file that we just created, and we're going to create a function sanity query, which will receive the query and the parameters, and this will call sanity client dot fetch method, and we'll pass the query and the parameters like this. Okay, so let's create a function for getting all the featured restaurants, and we need to return the sanity query with the query and that query that we just created. So let's just use that query. Just copy this query, and we will use it here. This will get all the featured restaurants with the restaurants and the dishes data. So let's just create another function for categories. Now let me just copy and paste the categories query here. This will fetch all the categories. Now we'll make one more function, get featured restaurant by ID. This will get the ID and pass the ID as a parameter to get the featured restaurant row. You can use it, but I won't be using this. So let's just go to the categories component, and we will use the categories query here. So let's use the use effect hook, and we need to call the get categories, and this will get us the data. And let's just console log this data to see if we are getting the data. Okay, so the configuration must contain project ID. I think we haven't included the project ID. Let me just check. Yeah, we need to provide the project ID, and the way you can get that, open the project and go to Sanity CLI, and this is your project ID. And the other way you can get that is open your project here and go to project manage, and there you will find the project ID here. So let's just copy this project ID and we'll use this here. Let's just save this, and now we'll be getting data. And yes, let's just go back and we are getting all the data. So let's just console log only the first object. Okay, so we are getting all the data, and notice that we have this ID with underscore before it. So we'll be changing all the IDs as well, and we have all this data with the name as well. So now let's just move to categories and create a state for all these categories. We will use our use state hook, and by default this will be empty array, and we are no longer be using this dummy categories. So this is the categories, and now we need to set the categories to data, and let's see what happens when we save it. Okay, so we're getting the categories names, but these are all just black. So let's just change the IDs to underscore IDs. So let's change this, and let's change this ID as well. Now we need to use the image from the category, and for that we'll be using a method that we created previously, URL for. As you can see, we have this method that we created earlier. Now we will need to pass the category image, and then we need to call the URL method on it, and this should work. Okay, category, I think we spelled it wrong. Okay, so we're getting all the categories from Sanity. As you can see, these are all the categories. Now if we go to our project, you can see we have all these categories here that are coming to our application. So all of this part is done. Now we need to go to the home screen, and we need to provide all the featured restaurants. So let's create a use effect hook, and we need to call get featured restaurants, and let's console log this data to see if we're getting all the featured restaurants. Got data. Okay, so if I save this, you will see we're getting all the featured restaurants as well. So we can see all the restaurants array in this featured record. Let's create a state for the featured restaurants. Featured restaurants, set featured restaurants. If I can spell. Okay, use state. I think we need to import the use state. So we'll set the featured restaurants here, and after that we'll be using the featured restaurants to show in our application instead of these dummy restaurants. Okay, when I save this, you will see the data just changed and we are getting the featured restaurants, but some of the data is missing. So let's just change this to name. Okay, we're getting the name of the featured row, and we're getting all the restaurants. So let's just go to the featured row, and let's move to restaurant card. And in here, I think we need to provide the image from the restaurant. So let's use our own method that we created URL for. So let's remove this, and we will add URL for the item image. We'll use the URL method. Okay, so all the images just changed. Now we're getting all the images data from Sanity. We're getting most of the data correctly from the Sanity, and the only thing that I think we need is the category. So I think it's the type. Oh, we're getting the error. So let's just console log this item to see what we have for the category. Okay, we have type, and inside that we have this name. So let's just choose the item type, and then we'll show the name. This will print the category for the restaurant. Okay, so all of this data is working correctly and we have all the restaurants. So now we need to go to the restaurant screen and we need to set the restaurant. So let's just go to the restaurant screen, and here when we move this, we don't have the image, we don't have the images for the dishes. So let's just fix that. Let's use URL for the item image like this, and this will fix the banner image. And now we need to specify the category as well. Let's just use type dot name. This edit the category, and we need to specify the dish image. So let's just move to dish row, and here we need to have the dish image. I think, yeah, we have the image. So let's just use the image. This is going to be URL for item.image, and we will need to call URL. Okay, so now we're getting all the images for the dishes. Now let's see what else we need to change here. Okay, so we need to change the ID to underscore ID, because if you remember, we have the underscore ID from the Sanity. So let's just change this to underscore ID into both places. Now if we click this, we're showing the cart icon, but total items are not working. So let's just go to the cart slice, and here we need to also specify the ID to underscore ID like this, and we need to change the methods as well. So we'll be using item dot underscore ID. So let's just change this to underscore ID. Now it should be working perfectly. Okay, now we're getting the total items and the icon is showing. So next part is the cart screen. So let's just move to cart screen, and we have this restaurant error because I think the restaurant is not being set. So we need to check that, and yeah, we need to specify the underscore ID. So now it should be working. So let's just move to the restaurant and go to the cart screen. Now we're getting the restaurant data, but we need to specify the dish image. So cart screen, and let's change this to our URL like this, URL for, and we need to call URL method. Okay, so now we're getting the images here, and all the total calculation is also working. Okay, so I think we won't be needing to change anything else. So let's just place this order. We should also be getting the restaurant data in this screen. So if we click on this, yes, we are getting the data. So with this, our application is complete and we have successfully integrated Sanity, and all the Redux configuration is working as well. I've shown you guys how you can use Sanity queries to fetch the data. So if you want to create further features for this application, you can do that easily. So this will be it for this application. Now let's cancel this order and add the last feature where you can use multiple color schemes. As you can see, we have this orange color scheme in our application. So let's add more color schemes into theme. Let me just copy all the colors. Here you can add your own text colors and background colors. I've added multiple color schemes. So let's just use the first one. It won't make a change because the first one is the orange. So as you can see, it didn't make any change, but when I change this to 1, this will change all the color schemes, and if I change this to 2, this will change the next color. So this way you can use multiple colors and this will enhance the look of your application. Very cool feature. Now you can see the look of our application has changed to this new color theme. If you open the restaurant, you will see the new color. If you place the order, obviously this GIF won't change, but all the screens have this new color scheme. So with this, our application is complete, and if you still have any questions, you can ask them into the comment section, and I will try to answer them as soon as possible. So do like the video and subscribe the channel. This will help me create more videos like this. So see you in the next video.